It's spooky month again, and in the spirit of the season, let's examine Van Helsing. I often hear this film used as an example of a work that, while it isn't necessarily good, it is fun. So let's have a look at it and see just how well this holds up. As an aside, I will be mostly limited to stills in this video. Using footage angers the copyright bots, and thus I must acquiesce to their tyranny. I apologize if this disappoints you. We begin our tale in Transylvania, in the year 1887. An angry mob is proceeding to break down the gate to Dr. Frankenstein's castle, who has just brought his monster to life. I'm contractually obligated to mention that Frankenstein is the doctor and not the monster. Take note that this first scene takes place in grayscale. I'll come back to that in a minute. The Doctor of questionable ethics revels in his creation for a moment before becoming aware of the ruckus the local townsfolk are making and heads to the window to see what's going on. Unfortunately for him, he's standing in a brightly lit room, making his silhouette easy to see from the ground. Noticing him watching only further invigorates the mob, and Frankenstein turns to flee, only to be surprised by the sudden appearance of another man. Frankenstein refers to the new arrival as Count, who then proceeds to remark that the Doctor's moment of triumph is about to be ruined by the townsfolk enraged by his grave robbing. Frankenstein replies that he needs to escape, but the Count replies that he can't allow him to do that, also demonstrating his teleportation abilities. Blinking around to various parts of the room, the Count continues that he will be taking the monster for himself, as he only gave Frankenstein the castle and equipment to suit his ends. The Doctor demands to know what purpose the Count is talking about, but we're interrupted by the mob breaking into the castle. When we cut back to the Doctor and his guest, Frankenstein is aghast by whatever the Count said to him, and remarks that he'd sooner kill himself than help. The Count remarks that he doesn't need him anymore, and so he doesn't care. But really, if his creation is so vital to your plans, you'd really want to take him alive, just in case. You can't get any information out of him if he's dead. The Count then proceeds to move menacingly towards Frankenstein, who calls out for Igor to help him, but his ugly assistant replies that even though the Doctor has treated him well, the Count has paid him. I don't know what Frankenstein thought Igor would be able to do, or when Igor would be able to spend any money that Dracula gives him, but either way, the Doctor arms himself with a sword from the wall, and notice its guard. It has a ring guard in addition to the quillins. That's not common in most media. An interesting touch. Dracula then comments that he can't be killed, and deliberately impales himself upon the blade to get to Frankenstein, and his face partially transforms as he sinks his teeth into the Doctor, ending his life. This spurs the monster to break out of his restraints, enraged by the death of his father, and he hurls a piece of lab machinery at Dracula, sending him flying into the fireplace. That's often been depicted as a weakness of vampires, but that only slows Dracula down. The monster then carries Frankenstein's body away in grief, but he's noticed by the townsfolk, who give chase and corner him in the windmill. And there's oddly a ton of alcohol inside, which the monster accidentally knocks over as he fumbles his way up the stairs. The monster emerges at the top of the windmill and screams, "Why?" to the mob. They're taken aback in shock, clearly not expecting the monster to be anything more than a dumb creature driven by instinct. I mean, fair enough, that's often how the monster is depicted. This reminds me of how people these days like to dehumanize anyone who doesn't agree with them. Once you find out that the people you're trying to make out to be heartless abominations display human traits, it can catch some of them off guard. Point being, don't be a scumbag whichever side you're on in an issue. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Dracula, having recovered and transformed, breaks out of the castle and is joined by his 3 wives, who then begin to make their way towards the flaming windmill. The townspeople flee for their lives, as vampires tend to be fond of consuming human blood, but these 4 have something else in mind. The monster takes one last look at his creator, calling him father before the windmill collapses, sending him and Frankenstein's corpse into the fire below. The vampires look on, with Dracula's brides wailing in grief, while Dracula himself is more stoic. This does a great job at showing how, generally speaking, men and women display emotions differently. Clearly, this creature was important to some plan that the vampires had been enacting, and its apparent loss costs them dearly. The brides show their grief quite plainly, but Dracula watches on coldly. He still feels it just as much as they do, but given that vampires were once human, our evolutionary traits still apply. Men have to be more reserved, as displays of emotion could be exploited by men of rival tribes. It's another nice little detail. We then fade out, and when we come back, we've skipped ahead 1 year later, and everything is in color now. I get that the grayscale was to show the past, but a 1 year time skip is a bit of an odd thing to pull it out for. Generally, that would be for a much longer time frame, but I digress. We behold a wanted poster depicting one Van Helsing. Historically, wanted posters weren't really used, but that's not often something I hold against media unless they're going for strict realism, which this film is not. The poster is removed by somebody garbed identically to Van Helsing, whom we come to find out this man is. He's distracted by a scream and moves off to investigate, and we can see that the Eiffel Tower is still under construction in the distance. Considering that the year is now 1888, the Eiffel Tower won't be complete for another year. That's some nice consistency with the real world. Van Helsing soon discovers the corpse of a young woman with a smoldering cigar nearby, and catches a glimpse of a hulking figure climbing into the Notre Dame. Entering the cathedral's attic, our protagonist is confronted by Mr. Hyde, of the well-known story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's been chasing this being across Europe from their exchange of dialogue, where Hyde reveals that he's been shot through the tricep, though this is a rather odd-looking wound. It looks fresh, but isn't bleeding. Van Helsing shot Hyde in London, and they're in Paris now. A straight line between the two cities is about 313 miles, and that's a straight line which they obviously couldn't have traveled. I'm not knocking the film for the detail, it's merely strange that the wound doesn't look more ragged, like the body's been trying to heal. Van Helsing informs Hyde that his superiors would prefer that Hyde be taken alive so that they can purge Jekyll of him, but Hyde responds by backhanding Van Helsing and ducking out of the way as the latter responds with dual revolver fire as he flies through the air. Hyde then makes his way towards Van Helsing, swinging from the rafters like a gorilla, but Van Helsing counters with a pair of circular saw blades attached to his wrists. This would need to be applied almost like a guitar, seeing as the blades extend from the wrist rather than being held in the hand. Do these make much sense? No. Are they cool though? Definitely. Van Helsing slashes Hyde across the midsection, but it doesn't seem to faze the monster much. Hyde then retaliates by ripping the cathedral's bell free and pinning Van Helsing beneath it. He's alarmed by the sound of saws cutting through the floorboards though, and lifts the bell to find a hole has been cut through the floor. Van Helsing has successfully mind-gamed him though, as he had braced himself inside the bell, and once Hyde lifted it, he cuts off one of his arms. Interestingly, the arm flops around on the floor for a few seconds before reverting back into a human arm, as opposed to Hyde's oversized ones. This is a moment of foreshadowing. Hyde seizes Van Helsing, but instead of smashing him against something or crushing him, he hurls him through the roof before leaping after him. Ah, the classic villain move of just throwing the hero around instead of killing them. He then throws Van Helsing once again, this time off the roof. Our hero responds by firing a harpoon through Hyde, which stops his fall and tethers him to Hyde. Again, rule of cool over realism, but I'm not complaining. I would like to point out that such an abrupt stop after nearly hitting the ground would scarcely be different from actually hitting the ground, but so be it. This also means that Van Helsing has some incredible grip strength. Van Helsing tries to pull Hyde off the roof, but the latter is able to keep his footing and yanks Van Helsing up, though he ends up falling off the tower, and the line causes him to swing out through the stained glass window to his demise. Just before he makes contact with the ground, Hyde relinquishes control to Dr. Jekyll, who appears to have no idea where he is or what's going on before he collides with the ground and loses his life. That's rough, buddy. This was foreshadowed with the arm. Nice touch there. Jekyll's corpse is then discovered by a crowd, and a constable spies Van Helsing on the roof and calls out that he's a murderer. This explains the wanted poster. He's gotten a reputation for being a killer, despite him only killing monsters that were once human. But Van Helsing manages to make his way back to the Vatican in Rome without being captured by authorities. That's roughly 908 miles. No small sojourn, even by today's travel, never mind 1888. That had to take quite some time. Van Helsing heads into a confessional booth and receives a harsh scolding from a cardinal for not taking Jekyll in alive and damaging the Notre Dame. Even in fiction, employers have absolutely unreasonable expectations, am I right? The cardinal's also upset that Van Helsing attracts too much attention to himself, as their organization is meant to remain secret, and reveals that Van Helsing was given this job when he was found crawling up the steps of the church half dead. Whether he was an adult or a child at the time is never confirmed, but he is stated to have lost most of his memories. The confessional then doubles as an elevator, taking the pair down beneath the Vatican and into their headquarters. So this secret organization is responsible for keeping the world safe from the supernatural. Down here, they've got all sorts of things going on, from forging weapons, crafting chemicals, to even testing advanced tech. This explains some of the anachronistic devices seen in the film. But there's no rest for the weary, it would seem, as the Cardinal then assigns Van Helsing a mission in Transylvania to exterminate Count Dracula. According to the mission briefing, a man named Valerious the Elder swore that he and his family would never enter heaven until Dracula was killed. Wow, real upstanding guy here. Hey, none of you are allowed into heaven because I took this oath. Way to go, champ. And now, there are only two of their line left, a brother and sister named Velkin and Anna respectively. If they both die without killing Dracula, then their entire bloodline after Valerious don't get into heaven. Valerious left an inscription at the Vatican 400 years ago, though, and it is clearly part of a larger piece. It reads in Latin, "In the name of God, open this door." I wonder if that'll come up later. Along with the inscription is an insignia. One that matches the one on Van Helsing's ring, which was all he possessed when he was found. That's why the Cardinal wanted to assign him this mission, as he may find answers about his past there. Van Helsing then pays Carl the Friar a visit, who fulfills a similar role to Q in the James Bond movies, showing off all sorts of gadgets that will be important later, including holy water, a silver stake, and crucifixes. He even has a fully automatic crossbow, though he does refer to it as launching arrows and being gas-operated. Now, I'm not much of a gun guy. I don't have anything against them, I just don't find them particularly interesting. Real fighting should be done in melee. Anyway, gas operation is a gun term, and from my limited knowledge, there's no way that that weapon is gas-operated. It doesn't have the mechanisms. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, though. Crossbows also use bolts, not arrows. Rookie mistake. Carl has even created a chemical bomb, one that he's been working on for 12 years. He declares that when set off, it'll create a light source with the intensity of the sun that would probably make it lethal for miles around at least, as if it's that powerful, heat would have to go along with it, but I'll take that as hyperbole. Van Helsing then surprises Carl by telling the friar that he is coming along, to which the latter responds with slight profanity, and when questioned, declares that he's not a monk and only a friar, so he can still curse as freely as he wants. I love bending the rules. 714 miles to the east, the siblings mentioned earlier have laid out a trap for one of Dracula's creatures. Velkin is tied to a post in the middle of the woods. Perfect bait. A werewolf bursts out of the trees, but Velkin wasn't as helpless as he appeared. Instead, he flips onto the top of the post, and another man pulls a lever, which causes the rope he grabbed to be retracted and bring him up out of the werewolf's reach. But the lever jams, and the second part of their plan fails to be put into action. This is why you should probably test these things first. Anna then tries to rush the werewolf, but fortunately for them, it manages to fall into the pit that had been prepared for it, and the other men cut the rope, causing the cage that had landed in to be lifted into the air and trapped. Again though, their plan doesn't appear to have been thought out all too well, as Velkin tries to shoot the werewolf, but his gun is knocked out of his hand by the cage slamming into him. He does manage to jump to a nearby tree, but that cage isn't going to last long. The other men try to shoot the beast, but only silver bullets will hurt it, and so they accomplish nothing. Some of them even end up hitting the bars of the cage itself, reminding me of how stair banisters in Rainbow Six Siege would always manage to eat all of my shots and get me killed. Seriously, that game had issues long before Ubisoft drove it into the ground over the past couple of years. As Anna goes for Velkin's revolver, the cage falls from the tree and smashes open, letting the werewolf loose. It then proceeds to chase Anna towards a cliff, but she's pushed out of the way by Velkin, who somehow managed to get his gun back and reach her faster than the werewolf. What? There's no physical way he could have done that. Anyway, he does manage to shoot the werewolf, but it takes him over the cliff with it. Hitting water from that height wouldn't be much different from hitting rock, so that had to hurt. We then have a short sequence of Van Helsing and Carl making their journey to the region, which includes some sweeping helicopter landscape shots that remind me of The Lord of the Rings. Man, I wish we had some more of that these days, instead of CGI schlock. They eventually arrive at a small village, while Carl is questioning Van Helsing about what he does remember. He answers that he remembers fighting the Romans in 73 AD, which was over 1,000 years ago. To put it bluntly, Van Helsing is old. This does help to establish that there's more to him than meets the eye. He's definitely not some regular average Joe with amnesia, but the villagers clearly don't trust the pair, and begin following them with whatever makeshift weapons they have on hand, and some of these props are rough. Some clearly have no edge on them whatsoever. Nervously, Carl asks why they're here again, and Van Helsing explains that Dracula is the spawn of the devil, and that anything Dracula has created or has been bitten by him will also die if he does. Remember that. It will be important later. I'm not sure why it's a thing, but the film establishes that it is. As it so happens, this is the same village shown in the opening sequence, as the same man that led the mob against Frankenstein feigns a greeting to the pair. As Van Helsing prepares himself for a possible confrontation, Anna appears on the scene and demands to see their faces, as strangers aren't trusted around here. Fair enough, I suppose. You can't be sure that they aren't in league with Dracula, like Igor clearly is. When Van Helsing refuses to comply, Anna orders that the villagers kill them, but they hold back in fear when Van Helsing isn't intimidated and declares that they can try. This buys him enough time to tell Anna that he's here to help her, to which she responds by claiming that she doesn't need it. Van Helsing questions this as he unslings his crossbow, and we can see that Dracula's brides are rapidly approaching. The trio scatter as Van Helsing begins shooting at them, though he doesn't manage to hit their hearts, and thus has little effect on them. The townsfolk scatter, and the brunette wife, whose name I don't believe is mentioned, tells the blonde to kill the new arrival. She seems to be the one in charge of the three, as we see her give commands more than once to the others. Van Helsing calls out to Carl that his weapon isn't working, and Carl tells him to aim for their hearts as he throws Van Helsing a new magazine. Hitting a specific target isn't that easy, especially not in real life. Seriously, I've had people state that you can just shoot a gun out of someone's hands with a straight face. Out of touch to the nth degree. Back on track, the three vampires quickly scatter just before the clouds part and take cover. The sunlight falls upon the village, and everything becomes still. This establishes that the vampires can move during the day, so long as they don't stand in direct sunlight. Cloud cover means that you are not safe from them. Kind of the opposite of werewolves in a lot of media. When the moon is blocked, the werewolf becomes a human again and you're safe. With vampires, if the sun is blocked, you're in danger. We also get to see just how many bolts Van Helsing has unleashed. I counted 55 embedded into various objects in this shot alone. Splashing from the well draws Van Helsing and Anna's attention, indicating that one of the wives took refuge in it. As they gaze in, they can't make anything out, as it's too deep for the light to reach all the way down. I mean, a few bolts down there wouldn't hurt, right? But the clouds swiftly return, and the red-headed wife bursts out and snatches Anna, who does manage to free herself momentarily by cutting the vampire's ankle, but she's grabbed again by the brunette. Van Helsing then puts a bolt through her wing, causing her to drop Anna, though this does leave Anna hanging on the edge of a building several stories up. Not exactly what I'd call a good place to be. The blonde then makes another pass at Van Helsing, and Anna jumps into a nearby tree and reaches the ground, albeit hitting several branches on the way down. Anna takes refuge inside one of the buildings, but is swiftly confronted by the redhead, who transforms back into her human form. Anna calls her by her name, Alira. The blonde then confronts Van Helsing directly, also transforming, but we cut away and back to Anna, who attempts to escape through a door, only for Alira to be on the other side, showing that the wives too have the ability to teleport. Alira then backhands Anna through the shutters, where she falls back onto the street. Van Helsing had dropped his crossbow when the blonde attacked him, and the two have a bit of a standoff. Van Helsing needs to get to his weapon, but the blonde is playing it safe by not immediately rushing him, as he could have other surprises. Vampires are tough, but they aren't invincible. Carl then tries to toss a bottle of holy water to Van Helsing, but it's intercepted by the brunette, who hooks it into the well before ordering the blonde to hurry up and kill Van Helsing. She calls her by her name as well, Mariska. This move does establish that holy water can allow a vampire to be killed, even if not hit in the heart. Carl is then quick to call out that the church conveniently has a small fountain of presumably holy water. How fortuitous. Anna has made it back inside one of the buildings again, but Alira has been waiting for her, and it isn't long before the brunette catches her as well. Dracula really was living it up, wasn't he? Back outside, Mariska knocks Van Helsing down hard several times as he makes a run for his crossbow, but doesn't maintain her situational awareness, flying off and taunting him without realizing that he has just landed right in front of it. Van Helsing takes hold of his weapon and is able to reach the fountain, dunking it in the water and taking aim as Mariska desperately tries to catch up and stop him. He puts her on full blast though, and she is pinned to the side of a building. There does seem to be some sort of psychic connection between Dracula's three wives though, as Alira and the brunette cry out as Mariska is killed, breaking away from killing Anna to retreat, calling out Mariska's name in grief. Mariska then begins to decay rapidly, and the CG really didn't age well on that. I generally don't care about that sort of thing too much, but this movie has some effects that still look particularly good, while others much less so. It's a mixed bag, but the townsfolk aren't the least bit grateful for this, and are prepared to mob Van Helsing. I doubt that would work out well for you, seeing as he's got several weapons, and the most you lot have are pitchforks and sickles that don't have edges on them. Carl questions why they're upset, and the mob leader explains that vampires only kill 1 or 2 people a month, but now they'll kill for revenge. And yet you all still choose to live here. I suppose anyone with an intellect left long ago, and now the stupid are just reproducing here. Anna stops them, however, as she has apparently heard of Van Helsing, and deduced that this is indeed him. It would seem as though the villagers have heard of him as well, as they murmur and gasp at this news. That must be quite the reputation indeed to be known this far and wide in the year 1888. I'm not sure if I should offer my congratulations or condolences. Anna then states that he's the first one to kill a vampire in over 100 years, letting us know that there have been vampires before Dracula and his brides, and offers him a drink. Also, there does seem to be some kind of canister in the butt of Van Helsing's crossbow. Maybe it is somehow gas-operated. I'm not sure how that would work, but it's a nice detail that could have easily been ignored. Well done on whoever designed the prop there. The villagers' tools might not have edges on them, but at least there was some thought put into this. But Dracula too seems to have a psychic connection to the others, as he awakens from his icy coffin, screaming in grief for Mariska. He then questions to his wives why they can't be left alone, as, quote, "We never kill more than our fill, and less than our share. Can they say the same?" End quote. I get it, it's campy villain dialogue. But leave you alone? You're the aggressor, my man. You want to eat them. Of course someone is going to fight back eventually. And your share? Share implies that this is a mutually beneficial deal. It isn't. Still, this does make me wonder why the vampires have never tried to pseudo-farm humans. Keep them hemmed in somewhere, and make sure that they keep producing little humans that will grow up to be your harvest. As it stands, these yokels could potentially flee the area, leaving you with no humans left. But this scene also shows us that vampires can walk on walls and ceilings as though they were the floor, as Dracula just wanders up there like it's nothing. As the two remaining brides grieve the loss of Mariska, he offers to find a new bride, which upsets them, and they question if he has no heart. Dracula replies that he does not, and that he can't feel love, fear, joy, or sorrow. This is obviously just dramatics, as we can see in numerous scenes that he is quite capable of emotions, including the ones he just described. He certainly was distraught over Mariska's death. Continuing though, he remarks that he will have to find out the identity of the newcomer who killed one of his wives, and we can clearly see that he has another werewolf in the background. He intends to try another experiment tonight, but his wives plead with him not to, as the last one ended in failure. Whatever it is they're trying, it means a great deal to them. Dracula erupts in anger at their interjection, which causes the two to cower, but Dracula recovers and asks them not to fear him, as everyone else does. This man has them wrapped around his finger. They're interrupted by the sounds of the werewolf roaring in protest as Igor continually shocks it with an electrified staff, and Dracula scolds the ugly man, saying, "Do unto others." But Igor responds with, "Before they do unto me." This does hint at a backstory. He did say that Frankenstein had treated him like a person, but Igor is rotten to the core and sided with Dracula for money. I guess his exterior really does reflect his interior. Dracula then commands all of his underlings to make for Castle Frankenstein. We then shift back to Van Helsing, Anna, and Carl, who are in a large manor house, which has seemingly been claimed by Anna's family. Van Helsing inquires where they can find Dracula, but Anna claims that nobody knows. He used to live in this manor that they're currently in, but left it long ago. She also states that her father would stare at the wall-sized map of the area for hours, pondering over where to find Dracula's lair. Anna then states that Van Helsing will die if he tries to help her, as everyone else in her family has died trying to kill Dracula. Just saying, Anna, if you're the last one, you might want to start having some kids ASAP. If you go, then your whole lineage is doomed. At least having a kid or two would ensure that it isn't completely game over. Bail from here for a few years and, get to it. Van Helsing then insists that they wait until morning to try their luck at making more progress, which is sound advice. Vampires don't have to worry about the sun at night, and can see better in the dark than you can. It's best to bunker down and wait for daylight. Anna then remarks that some say Van Helsing is a murderer, and others that he's a holy man. She wants to know which he thinks he is. He describes it as a bit of both. I mean, you kill monsters that are trying to kill you and others, so that really doesn't qualify as murder. Anna then tells him that he can wait here while she goes off to look for Dracula, though I have to question where she thinks she's going, as they still don't know where he is. But Van Helsing sprays her with something that renders her unconscious, and thus unable to leave. Anna awakens several hours later in bed, and is none too happy about what just happened. She angrily storms off to search for Van Helsing, only to be distracted by the sound of an ajar window clattering. She cautiously arms herself with a mace and makes her way to close the window. But upon turning around, she notices wet footprints on the floor. Or should I say paw prints. There's something in here with her, and it isn't likely to be friendly. Seeing as she set the mace down to close the window, Anna instead arms herself with a flintlock pistol and scans the room. The werewolf stalks her, and she fires at it while making a hasty retreat, but the clouds come into play again, blocking the moonlight. This is hardly the first piece of media to do this, but I have to question how it works. The moon being blocked by clouds causes werewolves to transform back into a human, but them being inside a building where the moonlight doesn't hit them does not. It's a little wonky, really. But as it turns out, the werewolf was Anna's brother, and he tries to communicate Dracula's plan to her, but gets cut off by the moon coming back behind the cloud, and he transforms back into a werewolf. It would seem as though he still has some small measure of control though, as when Van Helsing bursts in, Velkin jumps through the window and escapes instead of attacking. Carl then wanders in and questions why it smells like wet dog. Van Helsing, running off, replies that there's a werewolf, and much to Carl's credit, he doesn't panic. He just calmly responds that Van Helsing will need silver bullets, and tosses him a package of them. The guy may be a bit of a dweeb, but he does keep pretty collected and comes prepared. As Van Helsing moves off into the town again, he encounters the grave digger who's been leading the people, who claims that the coffin he's standing in is a little tight for him, but it would be a perfect fit for Van Helsing. What? He's like twice your size. He also claims that he's not afraid of the werewolf, as the latter doesn't see him as a threat. But as Van Helsing hears a noise and turns around, the gravedigger tries to strike him with his shovel, but the former catches it, and as Van Helsing sees the man's expression change, he ducks away as the werewolf barrels into the gravedigger instead, killing him. Van Helsing then takes aim with his revolver, loaded with silver bullets, but his aim is thrown off by Anna, and Velkin runs off. The two then bicker, and Anna says that he can't kill her brother, and Van Helsing replies that he'll end up killing people if he's not stopped. She then questions if he knows anything of forgiveness, and I'm thinking, really? He's going to kill people when he loses control, and you're saying killing him is a bad thing? Did you leave your brain at the mansion? But Anna counters that Dracula supposedly has a cure for lycanthropy. How she knows this is another question entirely. So Van Helsing wants to kill Dracula, and Anna wants the cure he has. Their goals are still similar. So Van Helsing agrees, stating that it's better to have memories of those you've loved and lost as opposed to not having any memories at all. Dracula's cooking up some plans of his own though, as his minions and Igor are preparing high-voltage lab equipment. Igor states that they'll be ready soon, but things are more difficult without Frankenstein. That's why you should have taken him alive. Van Helsing and Anna have been tracking her brother via tufts of fur he's been leaving behind. According to Anna, werewolves only shed before their first full moon, and after that the curse has taken hold irreversibly. This leads them to Castle Frankenstein, which was supposedly abandoned after the events of the opening. Not long after that was when her father went missing, having heard that Dracula was somewhere between here and the sea. Anna also expresses a desire to see the sea, hearing that it's beautiful. I'm assuming that she means the Black Sea, which borders Romania on the east. Van Helsing would have taken a ship across the Adriatic Sea, which is much farther to the west. This is the second time she's shown interest in the sea. The first was when Van Helsing mentioned that he had to sail across it on the way here. And she's right, the ocean certainly is awesome. Not going to lie, I miss it, but rent nearby is too expensive. Velkin returns to Dracula, who scolds him for not finding out more about Van Helsing. Velkin demands that Dracula leaves his sister alone, but the vampire dismisses him, then taunts him by declaring that he won't be able to refuse him after the night is over, as the curse will put him completely under his control. On top of that, Dracula then shows him the charred remains of his father, identified by his necklace. Velkin tries to attack the vampire, but his minions restrain him and strap him to a slab. Anna and Van Helsing quietly infiltrate the castle, taking cover from the Dwergi, but Dracula's experiment begins, and Velkin's slab is raised into the tower's opening, where he's to be struck by lightning, just as the monster was before. But Van Helsing and Anna soon discover what Dracula's up to. They find a great many hanging egg sacs, Dracula's children with his wives. Given that the vampires are dead, their offspring are also born dead, and these experiments are an attempt to give them life. So, where do these egg sacs come from? Actually, never mind. I have many questions that I don't want the answers to. Van Helsing remarks that Dracula and his wives only kill 1 or 2 people a month. But if these are brought to life, then the entire region will have to be killed for them, perhaps more. Velkin is then struck by lightning, and electricity surges from him through the wires connected to the egg sacs, which begin to stir. Ugh. That's all I have to say about that. Van Helsing then tries to rip one open, wanting to know what's inside, but the creatures begin to burst from the sacks, looking much like the brides do when they take on their vampiric forms. Given that these things were never human, it's possible that they don't have a human form. Dracula and his remaining wives then bask in their achievement, and if it wasn't a bunch of grotesque little gremlin gargoyles hatched from repulsive egg sacs that were going to destroy the world, it would be kind of wholesome. Dracula's a family man, it would seem. Dracula then tells his wives that their children need to be shown how to feed, and the two women jump from the balcony and transform, leading their progeny towards the town. Dracula then says to beg the devil that they stay alive, indicating that they got this far on their previous attempt, but their children died soon after. Van Helsing then draws a sawed-off shotgun of all things. The first pump-action shotguns were seemingly debatable on when they were created, as it depends on how you define them. Regardless, this one looks very modern. He slays several of the abominations, attracting the attention of Dracula. You just killed a man's children in front of him. Prepare for extreme wrath. Dracula then uses his powers to seal the doors, trapping Van Helsing in with him, but Anna is able to escape up the stairs on the other side of the chamber. Back in the town, Carl is distracted from his studies by the swarm of angry hatchling vampires, and he flees to try warning the townspeople. Dracula is now trying to locate Van Helsing, who has relocated during the interim. He declares that he can hear a person's heartbeat from a distance, and that most will beat ever faster as he approaches. But Van Helsing's is different, keeping a steady beat. Anna, however, has made her way to the lab, where she discovers Igor and the Dwerge are attempting to maintain the power levels, which are dropping. Seemingly, if it falls too low, the vampire children will die. Not sure why they need it now that they've been hatched, but them's the breaks. It would seem that, like his father, Velkin also can't be used to keep them alive, though judging by what's coming next, this is more than what happened last time. Back in the village, the vampires have arrived and begin to snatch anyone they can reach. It is odd that so many people are out and about at this hour. Way back then, there wasn't much to do after dark. People would rise with the sun, typically. Van Helsing then gets the jump on Dracula, piercing him through the heart with a silver stake. He declares Requiescat in pace, and he was doing this long before Ezio. Take that, Ubisoft. This only hurts Dracula for a moment, though, who replies with, "Hello, Gabriel." Now, I'm not religious, but this is clearly related to it, so forgive me if I don't mention who Gabriel is. Dracula then questions how long it's been since they have last met, but Van Helsing doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. Dracula quickly picks up on this, and questions Van Helsing on if he wonders why he has horrible dreams of ancient times, which prompts the latter to ask how he knows him. Anna has made her way up to where her brother is chained and tries to free him, but the curse takes him in a matter of moments, and he tries to attack her, his expression showing nothing but ferocity. Dracula then offers to refresh Van Helsing's memory, but Van Helsing whips out the cross that Carl had given him earlier, though this too has little effect, as it burns in Dracula's hand and causes him pain for a few seconds, but no lasting damage. Carl then saves a peasant woman by lobbing a bucket at the vampire that was trying to take her away. I have to say, nice throw for an underhanded lob like that. Well done. The vampire children then begin to explode in gory spectacle, much to the horror of their mothers. Dracula hears them as they return wailing to the castle, which buys Van Helsing enough time to escape through a lift, using his saw blades to sever a rope. He quickly locates Anna and launches his harpoon line, which has some phenomenal range. I mean, look at that. He then wedges it into one of the supports and attaches a line to it, allowing him to zipline down with Anna in tow. Note that this will deprive him of using this gadget again, and he wasn't seen to recover the silver stake. Velkin tears free of his restraints and gives chase, but the line snaps under his weight. He plunges into the river below, but Anna and Van Helsing manage to land on the opposite cliff. How that trajectory happened, I'm not sure. They should have been sent careening into the side of the cliff. Meanwhile, back at the village, the woman Carl saved asks him how she can repay him. And once again, he brings up how he's not a monk, just a friar. So he's technically not forbidden from doing certain activities. Dracula and his wives are mourning the loss of their children, and Igor claims that he can't replicate Frankenstein's work. and that the secret of creating life was taken to his grave. Like I said earlier, you put all your eggs in one basket with him, and then killed him. Very bad idea. If I was evil, which I'm not, I'd have taken someone or something that Frankenstein cared about, and then held that hostage to force him to work for me. Now that he's dead, you can't comb his brain for answers to your dilemma. But Dracula orders the now fully werewolf Vulcan to hunt down Van Helsing and Anna and kill them. This movie actually succeeds at creating an understandable villain, as campy as it is. He wants his offspring to live, relatable and not ham-fisted like a lot of media these days. We then cut to Anna scolding Van Helsing, saying that her ancestors have tried everything Van Helsing did in the past, and nothing has worked. Dracula is different from his brides. He doesn't have the weaknesses of normal vampires. But in another refreshing change of pace from today's movies, Anna admits that Van Helsing was right. It's too late to help Vulcan, and he's been turned into a monster. Really, most movie makers these days have an insufferable ego that they then give to their protagonists, who never admit when they're wrong. This is positively delightful. But do you notice where they are? They're standing in the burned remains of the windmill. That'll be important in a minute. Van Helsing then observes that it's raining and gives Anna his spiffy hat. The gesture's nice, but it's a little late by now. Funnily enough though, it would seem that Van Helsing did take the drink that Anna promised him, and somehow it didn't get smashed and all that. The two are about to share it when the floor collapses beneath them, and they're deposited in an underground cavern. We then cut to Carl, who wakes up from a nightmare of last night before remembering where he is after his nightly escapade with the peasant woman from last night. I have to give this actor credit. He went from playing Faramir to Carl. Very different roles indeed. But he accidentally leans on a decorative wall strut, which turns out to be a mechanism that swivels that section of the wall around to reveal an inscription, along with a painting depicting two knights in battle. The painting comes to life though, and the two knights transform into a vampire and werewolf, and Carl stumbles back over the couch in alarm. As Anna comes to, Van Helsing shushes her, stating that there's something down here, observing the various tracks and items scattered about. But as it would happen, Frankenstein's monster is alive, having survived the previous events. I suppose it's fortunate for him that the vampires didn't detect his heartbeat, as we'll see later, though I do have to wonder how he stayed alive down here. Surely there wouldn't be any food or fresh water, meaning that he'd have to go out for that. He attacks the pair, and is enraged that Anna refers to him as a monster, claiming that it's humans who have always attacked him. Fair point, at least for this story. Anna then asks what he wants, though her accent slips for this line. I'd have recommended another take. Her performance is good everywhere else in the film, it just slips for a second here. The monster replies that he wants to exist, but is dropped by a few darts from Van Helsing. Anna then moves to shoot it, but this time it's Van Helsing that stops her. The monster then explains that they should kill him, as he is the key to Dracula's machine, and that if he is used in place of a human, Dracula's children will be given life and not die immediately afterwards. Given that he was present when Dracula explained his intentions to Frankenstein, it does make sense that he would know this, being able to put two and two together. Dracula and his wives have mentioned more than once that they've tried to bring their kids to life before, and given this place's proximity to the castle, he very well could have seen those attempts. But Dracula and his wives have been busy, as the ones that died last night were far from all they've made. Like Van Helsing said, a man given several hundred years with 3 beautiful women, well... Van Helsing then stops Anna again, saying that he can tell this monster isn't evil and thus shouldn't be killed. They're interrupted by the werewolf, however, who they catch spying on them, and it retreats as Anna tries to shoot it. Uh-oh. So now that thing is going to report to Dracula that Frankenstein's monster is alive and where it is. Shoot him. It will be kinder than what Dracula is going to do to him, and it will save the world. But Van Helsing doesn't want to do this, and instead declares that if he can get the monster to Rome, that the Order can protect him. Good sir, that is hundreds of miles away, and you'll have to contend with Dracula, his brides, and the werewolf all the way there. There's not a chance that will work. I admire your moral fiber, but you have to analyze the situation here. Somehow, though, Van Helsing was able to get the monster out of there and chained inside a carriage where he intends to make for Rome. Anna states that there is nothing faster than Transylvanian horses, but this might just be bluster, as I could only uncover 2 breeds of horse originating from Romania, which Transylvania is a region in. One is a pony, so that's out, and the details I uncovered about the Romanian sport horse mention notable endurance, not speed. Getting an Indiana Jones-style map marker showing us just how far our protagonist is traveling, we see that Van Helsing has made it close to Budapest, Hungary. That's roughly 279 miles. Quite the distance indeed. Very far, but not impossible if they set out at sunrise and went all day at a pace that the horses could manage. But daylight won't last forever, and judging from the aerial perspective shot we get next, it would seem as though Dracula's wives aren't going to give up that easily. They can fly, which means they have an advantage over the horses. They won't have to cross terrain, like going up or down hills, or going around difficult stretches. They can move in a straight line. They'd have to make up for lost time, but they're supernatural. They very well might be able to catch up. And catch up they do, as the brunette snatches Van Helsing from his seat. She does have to drop him though when he grabs a hold of her wing, as she'd fall otherwise. Fortunately for him though, he lands on one of the lead horses. Unfortunately for him, though, the bridge ahead has been destroyed. Remember that there are no news stations or Google Maps to tell him that it's out, and he's barreling right towards it. He leaps back onto the carriage, but Alira then knocks him back off it, and he ends up clinging to the harness connecting the horses to the carriage. But the vampires quickly realize what's happening when they notice the bridge. Remember that both parties here want the monster alive. Van Helsing wants to save him, and the vampires need him alive so that he can bring their children to life. I must confess, I enjoy moments where both sides are after a plot device like this. The horses manage to leap the gap, taking Van Helsing along with them, but the carriage gets stuck and is pulled away, falling into the ravine. The 2 women fly after it, trying to pull the carriage back up, but it's too heavy. Alira falls back, calling for her fellow bride to pull the monster out of it. She rips off the door, only to find that the carriage is empty. Here's the part that I have the biggest issue with of the film. On a road running nearly parallel to the one Van Helsing is on, Anna has an entirely separate carriage, this one actually containing the monster and Carl. What? What is this nonsense? And why is there another road within glancing distance of the one Van Helsing was on? It would have needed its own bridge, and why would it have been made in the first place? And if you're doing a decoy system like this, then you wouldn't want the real carriage to be this close to the fake. The latter would need to be much more visible and attract attention away from the real one. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. But the fake carriage has a payload of stakes with an explosive charge, and the brunette flees the scene, but doesn't make it far enough away, being pierced with several and perishing. That was sheer luck, I'm not going to lie. Not impossible by any means, but still lucky that some of those managed to not only hit her, but hit her heart. We don't know if Alira had an immediate reaction to the other bride's death the way they did with Mariska, as we don't see her again for a bit. Instead, Velkin has activated his teleportation powers again, and is somehow ahead of the carriage that Van Helsing had just clambered onto. He and Anna duck out of the way, but are now hanging on opposite sides of the carriage. Worse, the werewolf struck one of the lanterns, setting the roof ablaze. Anna is hanging over the edge of the cliff, while Van Helsing is in danger of getting his Van Helsing ground off by the back wheel. But the decorative bracket that Van Helsing has held on to wasn't designed to support a person's weight, and he calls out for help. Uncertain of what to do, Carl looks at the monster, who offers to help. Carl asks if he will kill him, to which the monster replies, "Only if you don't hurry." Together, the two manage to extricate Anna and Van Helsing, and the carriage moves away from the canyon and back into the woods. The werewolf has caught up though, and leaps after Van Helsing as all of those aboard bail from the vehicle. Around what looks to be mid-morning, Anna discovers the body of Velkin. Van Helsing came prepared, it would seem, and his revolvers had been loaded with silver bullets. Velkin held on to life just long enough to die here, asking his sister to forgive him. So now, just as there is only one bride of Dracula left, so too is Anna the last of her line. But going back on what she had said before, Anna pushes Van Helsing against a tree, distraught that he killed Vulcan. He was a werewolf, and you acknowledged that. Get over it. I get that it's an emotional response, but come on. You've been up against the supernatural for your entire life. At some point, you're going to have to get a grip on this, or you will be dead too. Van Helsing has a wound on his chest though, and Anna remarks that he's been bitten. Given the location of the wound, this looks more like a slash wound, but the effect remains. Van Helsing has been cursed, and he has until the 12th stroke of midnight on the next full moon before he loses his mind. Anna backs away, but Alira reappears and takes her away. She's lucky here. There's some cloud cover, but not as much as when they attacked the village. If that had shifted, it would have been game over. Following her trajectory, Van Helsing, Carl, and the monster arrive in Budapest, where she confronts them again. She declares that Dracula wants to make a trade. The monster for Anna. Van Helsing counters that it needs to be somewhere public, where Dracula won't burst out into his vampiric form or use his powers. Alira replies that there's a masquerade ball tonight in the city, and that will meet their requirements. She then departs before anyone can respond. This was probably her best choice. As we'll see later, she probably couldn't have carried the monster off by herself. She might have been able to save him from falling to death in the carriage, but carrying him hundreds of miles while he's fighting back would be a different matter entirely. Taking a bargaining chip was the best course of action. Van Helsing stumbles slightly though, and the monster picks up on the fact that he's been bitten and remarks that he's going to become the thing he's hunted, and hopes that others will hunt him just as passionately as he had done. Van Helsing isn't dissuaded though, and renders the monster unconscious via a blow dart before hiding him in the town's graveyard. As they seal him inside, Carl informs him that, given the time frame, Van Helsing has 2 days before he becomes completely enthralled to Dracula, on the last stroke of midnight. Carl then wonders aloud if the monster can get out of where they placed him, and Van Helsing replies jokingly that he can't unless he gets some help from the dead. Ironically, this is when we see a sarcophagus shift and a hand peek out from within. That night, inside a mansion of some sort, we behold the ball Alira mentioned, with dozens and attendants. Dracula himself is present, and has bewitched Anna, who eventually snaps out of it. As he moves her past the mirror, notice how she's the only one visible in it. Dracula doesn't show up in it, but neither does anyone else besides Anna. Remember that. He then offers to make Anna a bride of his to replace one of the two he lost. So if you're Anna, you have 3 options. Die, try to fight back, or get comfortable with the notion of somehow creating those revolting egg sacs. Tasty, huh? Van Helsing, in the meantime, has infiltrated the party, and has forcefully taken the place of one of the trapeze artists, getting closer to the action, while Carl then pushes one of the fire spitters so that the flames hit Dracula, who releases Anna. This lets Van Helsing swing down and grab her, having cut the second line of the trapeze in half, letting him get close enough to the floor. They swing up to the balcony on the other side of the room, but Dracula taunts them. He tells them that this is his summer palace, and Igor arrives with more guests, and the monster being restrained by them. He calls out that these guests are all vampires in service to Dracula, and they oblige him by revealing their true forms, snarling at Van Helsing. Van Helsing and Anna hastily retreat, and are joined by Carl, who remarks that now he knows what his alchemical concoction is for. As he arms the device and drops it, the pair tackle him through the window, plunging into the water below as the device goes off, vaporizing all the vampires present. You would think that Dracula and possibly Alira would have been caught in this, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Igor and some Dwerge are then spotted taking the monster down the canal, and Van Helsing gives chase, but is stopped as a gate is lowered. He swears that he'll free the monster, but Carl then remarks that he can't, as he cabled Rome earlier, and they want the monster killed so that he can't be used in any more experiments. I don't have an issue with the second part of that information. It makes sense that the higher-ups wouldn't want to take any chances. I'd just like to know when Carl had the time to contact the Vatican. It must have been between when they hid the monster and the ball, but how did he do that without Van Helsing knowing? And why? It's a little odd, but Van Helsing flies into a rage, demanding to know if Carl told the Vatican about him, and if he's going to kill him, choking Carl as he does so, his eyes glowing like Velkin's did. Carl manages to get out that he didn't mention Van Helsing, and the latter manages to gain control over himself. Again, in a nice touch of a character owning up, he apologizes. A rarity these days, but this is a clear sign that the curse is progressing, as he never would have acted this way before. The group make their way the 279 miles back to Castle Frankenstein, only to find it abandoned and the equipment gone. All this in under 48 hours. Both sides work fast here. Anna then states that he must be at his main lair, the one they haven't been able to find for centuries. Carl, however, has been piecing clues together. At some point, likely when he was in the tower before the fledglings attacked, he uncovered that Dracula was actually the son of Valerious the Elder, the guy who made that stupid oath in the first place. This began when Dracula was killed, and Carl mentions that it was apparently by the left hand of God. I wonder who that could be. But upon death, Dracula made a deal with the devil for another life, but he would have to sustain himself on others. It was then that Valerious the Elder went to Rome and apparently made a deal with God that guaranteed that if Dracula was killed, they would be allowed into heaven. But apparently, Valerious couldn't bring himself to kill his son. I get the emotional connection, but I've never bought into it. If a relative of mine decided to become an abomination like that, I would have no problems with putting them down. Love should always have the condition of, don't become a monster that's looking to end the world. So instead, Valerious banished Dracula through a door from which there was no return. That was apparently countered by the devil giving him wings. Carl then states he doesn't know where the door is, but then shows the pair the painting he discovered earlier, stating that Valerious left clues. Come on, Valerious. You couldn't kill the thing that was your son, so you left vague clues and hoped that someone else would do it later. Weak. It's framed that he wouldn't kill Dracula, not that he was unable. Van Helsing then speculates that the map Anna's father had spent so much time staring at is the door. It's just that her father didn't know how to open it. As it so happens, the map has an inscription with a piece missing, one that just so happened to be the piece that Valerious left with the Vatican, which means that nobody would be able to open the door and kill Dracula, thus condemning his entire family to never enter heaven. Way to go, Valerious. Worst family member ever. But with the inscription complete and read, with the phrase, "In the name of God, open this door," the map melts away into an icy mirror. Van Helsing soon discovers that he can push his hand through it, and having little time left, goes through himself. On the other side is a snowy mountainside, upon which Castle Dracula is built. Carl comes through the door a few moments after the other two, and panics upon seeing the place, and tries to retreat back through the mirror, only to find that it's solid from this side. It's only one way. But that will create a problem for our cast later on, as if they can't get back through, how do they get down from here? There's no way out. But the massive gate isn't a problem, at least, as Van Helsing uses his curse to his advantage, leaping over it instead. Inside, though, are many times more eggs than what were in Castle Frankenstein. The monster's hypothesis was correct. The trio find Igor, who is quickly subdued, but catch a glimpse of the monster being prepared for the experiment, being lifted past their position. The monster tells them that Dracula has a cure for the werewolf curse, though how he knows this isn't explained. Van Helsing then demands that Igor explains why Dracula needs such a thing, but Carl figures out that the only thing that can kill Dracula is a werewolf, which was what the painting was depicting. Dracula can only completely control werewolves after the curse has fully taken hold. Thus, he keeps a cure on hand in case one musters up the will to fight him before that happens. So Van Helsing needs to kill Dracula after the first stroke of midnight, but before the 12th stroke. Not a lot of time. Van Helsing then intimidates Igor into leading Anna and Carl to the cure while he goes off to find Dracula, but he gives Carl the silver stake, saying that he must kill him if he fails. Credit to you for keeping to your duty. But did you have more than one stake? Because you never recovered the one you stabbed Dracula with. Van Helsing and Anna then share a kiss. Not the most fleshed out romance, but far from the worst. Dracula now begins putting his plans into motion, and the monster is lifted up towards the ceiling. The crackling of the electricity guides Van Helsing, who leaps to a chain to try and reach him. Igor then shows Anna and Carl where the cure is located, inside a large bubble that isn't just glass, as we'll come to find out, but also a fluid inside. Anna moves into the room first, but Igor kicks the distracted Carl and closes the portcullis behind them and flees. This is why you don't let the enemy stand behind you. But it isn't long before Alira appears, and while she taunts the pair, Anna pushes the globe over, which shatters and melts away the skin on Alira's face. If she were mortal, that would certainly have been lethal. A nice touch, seeing as that wouldn't stop Dracula if he needed to get it. Some of the acid remains in an unbroken piece of glass though, and Anna splashes it on the portcullis, which begins to melt. She sends Carl on his way to help Van Helsing, but Alira wants to settle the score. She hurls Anna across the room as her face regenerates, and Anna hits the wall hard. Honestly, that should have done some damage to her spine, but we'll look past that. Anna tries to keep her at bay with a torch, but Alira extinguishes them all with ease. Fire will not help here. As Carl hurries across the bridge, he's hounded by Igor, who's wielding the electrical staff that he'd been tormenting the werewolf Vulcan with before. A werewolf might just be hurt by that, but a human might suffer more extensive damage. Van Helsing is now reaching the monster, who tells him that he should be trying to get the cure to save himself. But Van Helsing replies that his friends are getting it and offers to be a friend to the monster. But to free him, he'll have to rip out the bolts, which will be painful. Van Helsing starts to rip them out, but lightning strikes, and energy moves through the wires as it did before. But whereas that was a mix of blue and yellow energy, this is green, and has a much different audio cue. Dracula revels in the fact that his kids will live with just another shock like that, but catches sight of Van Helsing trying to free the monster. Enraged, he transforms back into his vampiric form. The first time we get a clear look at it. Van Helsing only has one last shackle to go, but Dracula arrives and throws him from the tower as lightning strikes the monster again. Now Dracula's children begin to hatch, this time with true life in them. That's just a bit unfortunate for the world now, isn't it? The blast from the lightning is enough to send the monster flying away, breaking his last restraint. Fun fact, it's not electricity that sends someone flying. It's their muscles contracting that does it. It just happens outside of their control. The monster is saved by grabbing onto one of the electrical lines hanging about, but it snaps and swings downward, catching along the edge of the bridge. Carl ducks under it, but Igor isn't so lucky, being thrown off the bridge to his demise. Good riddance, you exorcist reject. Alira is now playing with Anna, stalking her from the darkness, and we get to see what it's like from their perspective. This is likely what Dracula was referring to when he said he could sense people, as we can hear Anna's heartbeat and see her quite clearly. But the vampire abuses her teleportation abilities and hits Anna with her trademark backhand. We then get to see Carl struggling with the dilemma of following his orders of letting the monster die and the moral consequences of doing so. He makes the choice to go with his conscience though, and dislodges the line from where it's stuck, trying to free the monster. This ends up sending him into the tower where Alira has seized Anna, and he plows into her. Given his size and the speed he was moving, that would have packed a serious wallop. Dracula then confronts Van Helsing, informing him that it's too late. His children are alive. But remember what Van Helsing said earlier? Anything created by Dracula will die with him. So the only way to kill the Horde is to kill him. The clock begins to chime midnight, and Van Helsing starts to transform. Dracula now realizes what's happening. Remember that Alira never found out that Van Helsing had been infected, so this will be a surprise for him. This will also be the longest chiming of a clock in the history of the world. I'm just going to point that out now. What happens next will take quite a few minutes, so there's no way that this realistically took place within 12 chimes. And so the pair begin to duke it out. Dracula, all you need to do is evade Van Helsing until the time's up, and then he'll be completely under your control. You don't need to fight him. get out of there and you win. Alira tries to get at Anna again, but the monster grabs her ankles and tells Anna to go and help Van Helsing. Monster, you're strong, but she can teleport. Why she doesn't use this ability to escape your grasp, I don't know. Anna says thank you to the monster, which is probably the first time he's ever heard that, as shown on his face. The monster might be made up of the corpses of several men, but he's still a man at heart, and a man will do whatever it takes for his people. This very structurally unsound bridge begins to crumble as the lightning strikes it though, and Carl only has a very narrow and potentially deadly section to shimmy across. He calls out to Anna, who swings across on the lines. Carl, with his classic underhanded lob, throws the syringe to Anna, who manages to catch it, but is knocked onto the castle's outside structure by Alira, who has escaped the monster. She remembered her teleportation, it would seem. Alira then taunts Anna, moving slowly towards her, but this has allowed Carl to catch up, and he throws Anna the silver stake, which she uses to pierce Alira's heart. Anna then says something that I would like to iterate to all melodramatic villains. If you're going to kill someone, kill them. Don't stand there talking about it. Alira then dies in a much more violent fashion than the other two, looking more like the gory explosions of the vampire children. Dracula has resorted to trying to bargain with Van Helsing, though this is hollow, as if Van Helsing doesn't kill him, he'll just end up as a mindless thrall. Van Helsing isn't having it though, and grabs the vampire by the neck, but the clouds passing in front of the moon cause him to revert back into a human. Dracula then announces that it was Van Helsing who killed him the first time, calling him the left hand of God, and shows him that his ring finger is missing, cueing us in that the ring Van Helsing carries was a token from when he killed Dracula. But the moon comes back again, and the fight continues, this time to Dracula's death, resulting in his children dying as well. Anna and Carl have caught up though, and Anna tries to inject Van Helsing with the cure, but he tackles her instead. This makes me question just how much control he has. He showed quite a bit during his fight with Dracula, making intimidating gestures that the two feral ones were never shown to make, but he attacks Anna now. We haven't had the 12th stroke yet. Carl then readies the stake, clearly not wanting to kill Van Helsing, but knowing that he must. The werewolf catches him by the arm though, enraged, but his expression changes as both look down and see that the syringe pierced his abdomen. Looking back, they behold that Anna is dead. What? She's taken much harder hits than that in this final sequence alone, and there's not a mark on her. How did this kill her? Van Helsing then reverts into a human once more and mourns Anna. The final sequence shows Van Helsing and Carl burning her body on a pyre while the monster paddles away on a raft. Where are you going? That isn't sturdy enough to get you across a body of water like that. The monster deserved better than this. This is also by the sea, which Anna had mentioned more than once. But Van Helsing beholds an image of Anna in the clouds, surrounded by her family, showing us that they did indeed get into heaven. Van Helsing gives a smile, puts on his spiffy hat, and he and Carl ride off into the sunset, concluding the film. So, on to the scoring. Objectively, this film does decently well, though there are a few instances of characters warping around to where they really shouldn't be, large distances covered very quickly, characters acting somewhat off, and some style over substance going on. I would give it a 6 on that scale. As for subjectivity, I would give this a 7. This is overall just a fun movie. It sits at about 2 hours, and I scarcely notice the time go by when I watch it. Is it campy? Yes, but it owns it and embraces it to maximize the entertainment value. This was a mashup of various spooky story elements that was unique at the time it was released. Remember that we wouldn't have MCU-style films for a while. I hadn't watched this movie in years, so it was a blast to go back and revisit it. Give it a try if you want some good old-fashioned dumb fun. But what do you think of this film? Did you enjoy it? Or was it not up your alley? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like on this video if you're so inclined, and subscribe to see more. I would like to thank you for watching, and may you all have a weapon in each hand.